Not all gifts should be unwrapped. Not every secret ought to stay hidden. And certain truths, once entered, will not rest quietly. They rise with a soft but unstoppable force, reshaping history in the process. December 1873. The air sat thick and moist over the Mississippi River Delta, a veil of mist entwining the ancient cypress and winding bayous. In the wealthy plantation districts, where war wounds remained raw but grandeur's illusion lingered, a deal was struck. One murmured in low voices, a dark remnant of a past many claimed was dead, yet clung to the land like Spanish moss. Two girls, twins barely 14, their names and histories purposefully erased, were bought at a clandestine auction. They weren't meant for fieldwork or household service. No, their destiny was far grimmer, wrapped in red velvet, and offered as Christmas morning presents to the Baron's two wayward sons. What followed wasn't a tale of ghostly intervention or grand revolt. It was a narrative spun from silent vigilance, desperate valor, and an almost inconceivable act of rebellion. What these two girls did in the spring of 1874 would not only dismantle 3 families, but also uncover a conspiracy of silence so deep it had become the community's very foundation. It would drive an entire county to burn its records, move its courthouse, and collectively deny a whole winter ever occurred. The Baron who purchased them was never seen again. His legacy dissolved into rumors and conjecture. His sons were discovered, yes, but what was done to them? Not physically, but to their very souls, defied explanation, surpassing the crude justice of that era. And the twins. They vanished, not into thin air, but into a network so vast, so carefully concealed, that even today historians refuse to speak of it publicly, fearing the implications of its true scope. Before we plunge deeper into the chilling saga of the Baron and the twin girls who forever altered fate, Helena Parrish, I urge you to ponder the weight of forgotten histories. If you're drawn to the darkest corners of American history, the tales deliberately left out of textbooks, the events they desperately tried to erase, then please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Because this story, though rooted in the Louisiana Delta, touches more places and lives than you might ever imagine. Now let us journey back to a time when law was a flexible suggestion, when power was measured not just in land, but in the lives labored upon it, and when 2 innocent children, gift, wrapped like dolls, faced a fate that would either shatter them or forge them into something indestructible. The parish of St. Helena, Louisiana, in the winter of 1873, existed in a perpetual twilight, caught between the brutal realities of a recent war and the uncertain dawn of a grudgingly accepted freedom. 8 years had passed since the cannons fell silent, since the Emancipation Proclamation theoretically broke the chains. Yet Reconstruction, rather than healing, only deepened the South's festering wounds, twisting old injustices into new insidious forms. The grand plantations, monuments to a bygone era of cotton kings and human chattel, still stood. Their white columns, often chipped and peeling, gleamed defiantly in the weak winter sun, casting long skeletal shadows over fields that stretched endlessly. But the labor sustaining them had shifted, at least on paper. The fields were now worked by men and women legally free, yet practically enslaved by debt and fear. Sharecropping had replaced the auction block, but the chains were now invisible contracts, exorbitant interest rates, and the constant threat of eviction rather than cold iron. The illusion of freedom was a cruel mirage, shimmering just out of reach. Greensburg, the parish seat, was a small, dusty town of barely 800 souls, yet it was St. Helena's nerve center. It housed the courthouse, a squat brick building with a perpetually leaking roof, the land office where every deed and mortgage was meticulously recorded, and the only bank for 30 miles, Its vault silently testified to the wealth concentrated in a few powerful hands. Greensburg was built on paper. Records, deeds, contracts, mortgages, titles, and the occasional bill of sale for livestock or equipment. Everything was written down. Everything was filed. And in 1873, those records were more precious than gold, for they determined ownership. And more critically, who owned whom, even if the language had shifted from slave to debtor or tenant. The power of the written word, even twisted, was absolute. At the apex of this fragile, simmering world sat a man the locals, with a mix of deference and disdain, simply called the Baron. His real name was Lucian de Virieux, though no one dared utter it without the honorific. He wasn't nobility by blood or European standards, but he carried himself with an air of inherited superiority, as if the land itself bowed to him. Tall, with silver hair that seemed to catch light even in dim rooms, and a voice like distant thunder rolling across the delta, de Virieux was a force of nature. He owned 4,000 acres of prime delta land, rich and fertile, and controlled the labor of over 200 people. Technically, they were sharecroppers, technically free. But de Virieux held their debts, contracts, livelihoods, and their children's futures in a thick leather-bound ledger locked in his study. A ledger more powerful than any law. His word was law, his ledger, scripture. He had 2 sons, heirs to his name and domain, but not to his cunning or formidable will. The elder Henry was 22, a man hollowed out by idleness and inherited cruelty. He possessed his father's imposing height, but none of his calculated presence. Henry spent his days riding the property line on a magnificent black stallion, rifle slung across his back, enforcing boundaries no one dared cross. He had a reputation for quiet malevolence, a chilling cruelty that didn't need to raise its voice to instill terror. Workers who displeased him found rations mysteriously cut, cabins searched without warning, children suddenly reassigned to the most brutal fields. His cruelty was a slow, methodical burn, designed to break spirits, not bodies. The younger son, Julian, was 19, and if possible worse. Where Henry was cold and calculating, Julian was volatile, a live wire of unpredictable rage and self-indulgence. He drank too much cheap whiskey, gambled away sums his father quietly covered, and took far too much pleasure in breaking things, be it glass, spirit, or bone. He'd been expelled from 2 New Orleans schools, returning with mounting debts his father grudgingly paid, and a temper his father, for reasons unknown, quietly ignored. Julian collected things, gleaming guns, wickedly sharp knives, and exotic birds he kept in ornate cages until neglected and starved. Perpetually bored, and boredom in a young man with unchecked power and a cruel streak was a truly dangerous thing, a spark waiting for kindling. Lucien de Virieux loved his sons not for who they were, but for what they represented: the continuation of his name, the perpetuation of his empire. He loved them as a king loves his heirs, as extensions of his own power. And in December 1873, as the festive season approached, he decided to give them a gift that would bind them to him forever. A lesson in the ultimate brutal truth of power, that some people are not people at all, but things, and things, no matter their form, can be owned, controlled, and disposed of at will. The de Virieux estate, known simply as the Baron's Place, by locals, sat at the end of a long, winding oak-lined drive that seemed to stretch forever, an arboreal tunnel to a forgotten past. The house itself was a sprawling 3-story monument to a world Lucian refused to believe no longer existed. White painted brick, imposing and austere, with tall, narrow windows that stared blankly, and wide verandas wrapping around the entire structure, offering shade in summer and chilling exposure in winter. Inside, rooms were vast and cavernous, filled with heavy dark furniture shipped from France. portraits of Fox ancestors from European nobility, and a silence so profound it felt like a held breath, waiting for something to shatter it. Behind the main house, a community of 200 souls lived in cabins unrepaired since before the war. These weren't picturesque whitewashed cottages, but rough-hewn shacks, roofs patched with tin, walls chinked with mud, floors bare earth. They worked the fields from first light until the last sliver of day faded, bodies aching, spirits weary. At night, they gathered in low voices, sharing meager portions of food, whispered stories of resilience, and urgent warnings passed down. They knew the de Vierux family, the casual cruelty of Henry, the explosive temper of Julian, and they knew what happened to those who displeased them. In December 1873, a new unease settled over the quarters, a premonition that something was coming, because the Baron had been making trips. 3 times in November, Lucian had taken the steamboat downriver to New Orleans, staying 2 or 3 days each time, telling no one where he went or what he did. But when he returned, he carried himself differently. Not wary, but subtly shifted, like a man who had made a momentous decision and was deeply pleased. His sons noticed, exchanging uneasy glances. The workers noticed, tracking his movements with silent collective apprehension. And in a place like St. Helena Parish, where every gesture and secret trip held profound meaning, that secrecy meant something ominous was brewing. On December 18, 1873, Lucian made his final decisive trip to New Orleans. He returned on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, the air thick with anticipation and a biting chill, and he was not alone. The steamboat Crescent Belle, a paddle, wheeler whose ornate filigree belied its cargo of human and material goods, docked at the Greensburg landing just after sunset. The air was cold and damp, a pervasive chill seeping into bones, refusing to be dislodged. A thin, ghostly mist rose from the dark swirling waters, curling around moss-covered pilings and drifting like a phantom across the rough, hewn wooden planks. The few men unloading cargo, breath pluming in the frigid air, worked with frantic efficiency, eager to finish and retreat to meager warmth. Lucian descended the gangplank alone, a solitary, imposing figure. He carried a worn leather satchel in one hand, his long, black wool coat tailored to perfection, seeming to absorb the fading light, making him appear less a man than a moving shadow against twilight. He offered a curt nod to the dock workers, his gaze sweeping with almost imperceptible disdain, but he didn't speak. His silence was a command, a barrier. Behind him, emerging from the dim passenger cabin, 2 figures materialized, hesitant and small against the vastness of river and encroaching night. They were girls, twins, identical in every discernible way, their features mirroring each other with unsettling precision. They wore plain gray dresses, thin and threadbare, utterly inadequate for the biting cold. Their heads were covered with dark, coarse shawls pulled low and tight, obscuring their faces, rendering them anonymous. They carried nothing, no bags, no bundles, no cherished belongings. Nothing to suggest they'd come from anywhere or were destined for any place. They moved in perfect, synchronized unison, stepping off the boat together, stopping together, waiting together, like 2 halves of a single silent entity. One dock worker, Tobias Holt, a grizzled veteran, later recounted to his wife Martha that the girls never once looked up. Their eyes remained fixed on the ground, averted, as if the very act of looking might invite further misfortune. And when the Baron, with a dismissive flick of his wrist, gestured for them to follow, they did so without hesitation, without a single question, like shadows obediently trailing a body. Tobias, who'd witnessed countless arrivals, felt a prickle of unease. There was something profoundly unsettling about their absolute stillness, their utter lack of protest. De Vierux led them to a covered wagon, its canvas top stained and weathered, waiting at the dock's end. The driver, Cato, a stoic, taciturn man who'd worked the Devirak stables for decades, climbed down, his face etched with sun and toil, betraying no emotion as he opened the back flap. The Baron gestured again, a silent command, and the twins climbed inside without a word, disappearing into the dark interior. Cato closed the canvas flap, securing it tightly, and with a creak of wheels and soft thud of hooves on muddy road, the wagon rolled away, swallowed by gathering darkness and swirling river mist. No one asked questions. No one ever did, not when it concerned the Baron. To question was to invite trouble, and trouble in St. Helena parish often arrived with swift, brutal finality. But Tobias Holt, who had seen much in his 43 years, the rise and fall of river fortunes, the quiet desperation of the newly free, the casual cruelty of the powerful, said later he felt something profound that night, a coldness unrelated to the biting weather, a sense that something profoundly wrong, deeply unnatural, had just arrived in St. Helena parish, and would not leave quietly. It was a premonition, a shiver down his spine that lingered long after the wagon's rumbling faded into night. The wagon took the river road, a narrow, winding track following the Mississippi's serpentine course back to the Devirak's estate. The journey, nearly an hour, was arduous. The road was deeply rutted and uneven from years of neglect and heavy rains, the wagon's wheels groaning and creaking with every jolt and turn, a mournful lament against the night's silence. Inside, shrouded in darkness, the twins sat in perfect stillness. Cato, driving with his back to them, later swore he never heard them speak. Not once, not a whisper, not a sigh. Not even the subtle shift of breathing. It was as if they had ceased to exist, becoming mere cargo. When the wagon finally rolled through the imposing wrought iron gates of the Devirak's estate, it was nearly 1800s. The house, a beacon of light in the surrounding darkness, was illuminated from within, every window glowing with warm lamplight that belied the coldness inside. Henry and Julian, silhouetted against the bright interior, waited on the front veranda, smoking cigars, their faces lit by flickering embers, eyes fixed on the long dark drive. When they saw the wagon emerge from the gloom, they straightened, flicked their cigars into the damp dirt, and descended the wide stone steps, footsteps echoing faintly. Lucian climbed down, a triumphant smile playing on his lips, a rare display of genuine satisfaction. He looked at his sons, gaze sweeping with proprietary pride. "Gentlemen," he said, voice warm and resonant, filled with chilling pleasure, "your Christmas gifts have arrived." Henry's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, a flicker of unease crossing his usually impassive face. Julian, however, grinned, a wide, predatory smile revealing too much. Cato opened the wagon's back, and the twins, with characteristic, unsettling synchronicity, climbed out. For the first time bathed in the bright, unforgiving light spilling from the house, the Devirak sons saw them clearly. They were undeniably young, 14, perhaps 15. Their bodies still slender, not yet fully formed. Their skin was a warm light brown, hair dark and braided tightly against their scalps, meticulously neat. Their faces, now fully visible, were indeed identical: high, delicate cheekbones, full unsmiling lips, and dark, fathomless eyes reflecting lamplight like polished obsidian, revealing nothing beneath. They possessed a striking, almost ethereal beauty, the kind that made men uncomfortable precisely because they were children, and beauty in children, especially in such vulnerability, was a dangerous, often tragic thing. Julian, ever the more impulsive and overtly cruel, stepped forward, circling them slowly, his gaze lingering, inspecting them with detached scrutiny. Like a prize horse or newly acquired hunting dog, Henry remained where he was, expression unreadable, a mask of cold indifference. "Where did you find them, father?" Julian asked, voice laced with possessive curiosity. "New Orleans," Lucian replied, smug. "A private sale, very private. They have no papers, no family, no history. As far as the world is concerned, they do not exist. They are ghosts waiting to be given form by our will." Henry's frown deepened, a subtle crease between his brows. "Father, the law," he began, caution in his voice. Even Henry, with all his cruelty, understood the shifting post-war legal landscape. "The law," Lucian interrupted, dismissive, "is what we say it is, Henry. And I say these girls are property, my property, and now by extension, yours. A gift, a lesson, a tool." He gestured to the twins with a sweeping proprietary motion. "They will serve you, obey you, do whatever you ask without question, without complaint. Consider them an education in power, gentlemen, because power is not merely what you inherit. It is what you take, assert, and command." And Julian laughed, a sharp, ugly sound devoid of genuine mirth. Henry, as was his custom, said nothing, his silence more chilling than his brother's laughter. The twins stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the ground, hands folded neatly, a picture of passive obedience. They didn't react to Lucian's words, didn't flinch, didn't even seem to breathe. They simply waited. Two silent statues in the harsh lamplight. Lucian clapped his hands once, a sharp, decisive crack echoing in the cold night air. "Take them inside," he commanded Cato, voice brisk and businesslike. "Put them in the east wing, the small room at the end of the hall. Lock the door and ensure they are fed sparingly." Cato nodded, face impassive, and gestured for the twins to follow. They did, moving with eerie unison. Footsteps silent on the veranda's wooden steps, then fading into the house's echoing silence. Lucian turned back to his sons, triumphant glint in his eyes. "Merry Christmas, gentlemen," he said, voice a low purr of satisfaction. "Use them wisely. Remember, they are a testament to our enduring will." Then he went inside, leaving Henry and Julian standing in the biting cold, staring at the door through which the twins had vanished, the implications of their father's gift slowly settling upon them. That night, no one in the quarters slept well. The workers, huddled in unheated cabins, whispered to each other in the dark, sharing what little they knew. The Baron had brought something back from New Orleans, locked away in the East Wing, a gift for his sons. The air was thick with unspoken fears, the chilling understanding that the old ways, though legally abolished, were far from dead. And in the main house, in the small cold room at the end of the East Wing, the twins sat on the bare floor, in impenetrable darkness, holding each other's hands, bodies pressed together for warmth and comfort, waiting for Christmas morning, for whatever new horror it might bring. Their silence was not submission, but a deep, watchful stillness, a quiet assessment of their new prison. Christmas Day 1873 dawned not with festive cheer of carols and bright lights, but with cold, oppressive grayness. The sky was the color of old iron, heavy and unyielding, pressing down on the delta. A light, persistent rain began just after sunrise, soft, rhythmic tapping against the tall, narrow windows like insistent fingernails drumming on glass, a mournful accompaniment to the day. Inside, the de Virax family gathered in the main parlor, a vast, dim room dominated by a massive fireplace offering little warmth. Lucian sat at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, dressed in dark, impeccably tailored suit, silver hair combed back with meticulous precision, expression serene, almost beatific, as if he'd just performed a great benevolence. Henry and Julian sat on either side, unusually quiet, subdued by their father's presence and the unspoken weight of last night's arrival. The table was set with finest imported china, delicate porcelain adorned with intricate patterns, and gleaming crystal goblets catching meager light. Breakfast was a lavish spread of smoked ham, fluffy biscuits, homemade preserves, and steaming coffee, served by two women from the quarters, faces impassive, movements swift and practiced, eyes downcast. No one mentioned the twins. Their presence, though palpable, was a silent, uncomfortable truth, an elephant in the opulent room. After breakfast, Lucian rose, a subtle gesture commanding his sons to follow. They walked through the cavernous house in silence, footsteps echoing on polished wood floors, amplified in the stillness, until they reached the east wing, less frequented, colder, more sparsely furnished. Lucian produced a small ornate key from his waistcoat pocket. Brass gleaming dully, and with a soft click, unlocked the heavy wooden door at the hall's end. The room was small, barely larger than a closet. Sparsely furnished, a narrow, uncomfortable bed with thin mattress, a single rickety wooden chair, and a washstand with chipped porcelain basin. The air was stale, tinged with dust and confinement. The twins were where they'd been left, bodies pressed together, still holding hands, still utterly silent. They looked up when the door opened, dark eyes meeting Lucian's for a fleeting moment, but expressions didn't change, remaining as unreadable as polished stone. Lucian stepped aside with theatrical flourish, gesturing for his sons to enter the cramped space. "They are yours now," he said simply, voice devoid of emotion, as if discussing new farm equipment. "Do with them as you please. They are yours to command." Then he left, closing the door with a soft, definitive thud, leaving his sons alone with their gifts. What transpired in that small, cold room over the next 3 months isn't entirely known, not in full, brutal detail. The twins, Kora and Clara, never spoke of it later, their silence a testament to the unspeakable. The de Vieruc's sons never offered explanation, their memories conveniently selective. But there are fragments, whispers, pieces of testimony gathered later from the workers. Individuals who saw things, heard things, noticed things in the periphery of their own arduous lives. These fragments pieced together paint a chilling implicit picture. A woman named Delphine, who worked in the main house as a cook, hands perpetually stained with flour and grease, said the twins were brought to the kitchen every morning for a single meager meal. A crust of stale bread, a cup of water, sometimes, if lucky, a piece of bruised fruit. They ate quickly, movements precise and economical, in silence, eyes never meeting hers. As soon as they finished, they were taken back upstairs, their presence a fleeting, unsettling shadow. Delphine swore they never looked at anyone, never asked for anything, never made a sound. Their silence was absolute, unnerving. A man named Ezra, who tended the stables, hands gnarled from years of handling horses and equipment, said he saw Julian leading the twins to the old carriage house one January afternoon. The air was crisp, ground hard with frost. He remembered Julian's laughter, harsh, discordant, carried on the wind, and the twins' utter lack of response. Ezra said he heard sounds from the carriage house, sharp, splintering noises, like wood breaking or something being struck. But he didn't investigate. No one investigated. To investigate was to invite the Baron's wrath, a price no one was willing to pay. He simply turned his back, pretending not to hear, not to see. A young girl named Bess, barely 12, who worked in the laundry, small hands chapped from lye soap and cold water, said she saw the twins once through a window. A rare moment of stillness in her day. They were standing in their small room facing each other, hands clasped, lips moving in silent rhythmic motion. She said it looked like they were praying. A desperate, unheard supplication, but she couldn't discern the words. Their faces, even from a distance, seemed etched with ancient sorrow. A man named Samuel, who drove the de Vieruc's carriage, a sturdy, reliable man who'd served the family for decades, said that, in early March, he was ordered to take Henry and the twins into Greensburg. The spring air was softening, carrying damp earth and budding magnolia. He remembered Henry sitting in the carriage with them, posture rigid, gaze fixed ahead, while the twins sat perfectly still, hands folded, eyes downcast as if carved from wood. Samuel said when they reached town, Henry took them into the courthouse, the very place where land deeds and contracts were filed, where so many fates were decided on paper, and they were inside nearly an hour. When they emerged, Henry was smiling, a thin, satisfied curl of his lips, and the twins, as always, were not. Their faces remained blank, unreadable. Samuel, a man of quiet observation, asked Henry what they'd done in the courthouse, a rare moment of curiosity overcoming discretion. Henry, with dismissive wave, told him to mind his own business, tone sharp and warning. But Samuel noticed something when the twins climbed back into the carriage. One of them, he couldn't tell which, their resemblance uncanny, was holding a piece of paper. It was folded small, tucked discreetly into her plain gray dress sleeve, almost invisible, but he saw it. A fleeting flash of white against drab fabric. He never saw it again. The paper, like so much else in their lives, vanished into shadows. By mid-March, the workers whispered about the twins, not because of what they'd seen, for they'd seen little, but because of what they hadn't seen. The twins had been at the de Vierec's estate for 3 long silent months, and in all that time, no one had heard them speak. Not a single word, cry of pain, sigh of despair, or softest human utterance. Their silence was a profound, unsettling mystery. Some said they were mute, born without speech. Some said they were broken, spirits crushed beyond repair. Some, the more superstitious, whispered they were something else entirely, unnatural, touched by Bayou spirits. And then, on the night of March 19th, 1874, as the first fireflies began to dance in humid air, everything changed. The long silent vigil was about to break. The twins, Kora and Clara, had not been idle in their confinement. Their silence wasn't submission. It was a shield, a carefully constructed facade behind which their sharp, resilient minds worked with quiet, desperate intensity. Their mother, back in Virginia before the fire, had been a seamstress, but also possessed fierce love of learning. She'd taught her daughters to read and write, skills considered dangerous for their station, but skills that would become their salvation. She taught them to decipher intricate loops and flourishes of the written word, to unlock secrets held within pages. In the de Vierec's house, where books were often more decorative than read, they found a hidden treasure in dusty, forgotten corners of the East Wing, a small unused library smelling of mildew and neglect. They discovered old books, volumes of law, forgotten histories, even tattered novels. No one thought to lock them away, for who among the help would dare touch such things? And who among the de Vierec's family would even notice? Late at night, long after the house fell silent, after the last lamp was extinguished, Kora and Clara would slip from their room, moving like ghosts, bare feet silent on cold floorboards. By faint, flickering light of a stolen candle stub, or sometimes pale moonlight filtering through a grimy window, they would read. They devoured words, absorbing, understanding. They learned about the law, about contracts, property, ownership, and most crucially, about the chaotic, often contradictory legal landscape of Reconstruction. They learned that even in a system designed to oppress, there were loopholes, cracks in the facade if one knew where to look. They learned about the Greensburg courthouse, about ledgers, filings, official stamps that transformed mere words into undeniable truth. They understood that paper, properly executed, held power even greater than the Baron's wealth or his son's cruelty. when Henry had taken them into town in early March, ostensibly to file the document officially registering them as property of the de Virieux family. A grotesque illegal act, yet unchallenged in St. Helena Parish in 1874, Kora seized her opportunity. While Henry, distracted and arrogant, spoke with the clerk, Kora, with preternatural calm, slipped away. She found the records room, a dusty, dim chamber filled with towering shelves of ledgers. Her eyes, trained by countless hours of secret reading, quickly located the specific ledger where the document was to be filed. With heart pounding like a trapped bird, she stole a blank page, a pristine sheet of official paper, edges crisp, surface waiting for words. That page, folded small and tucked into her dress sleeve, was a tiny, fragile seed of hope. Their weapon, their shield, their only chance. They had endured the past 3 months not out of submission, but desperate, calculated patience, waiting for the precise moment to strike. Their silence wasn't brokenness, but profound, terrifying strength. March 19, 1874 was a Thursday, a day that began like any other, but would end in seismic shift. The weather had turned decisively warm, the first real languid warmth of spring, a welcome reprieve from biting winter. The air, thick with humidity, smelled of wet earth, burgeoning life, sweet intoxicating scent of jasmine beginning to bloom. The workers, bodies weary but spirits lifted by easier days, finished their day's labor in the fields, hoes and shovels clanking softly, and returned to cabins, grateful for longer daylight. At the main house, routine of power and privilege continued. Lucian was in his study, a room heavy with old leather and cigar smoke, reviewing ledgers by soft glow of a single oil lamp, brow furrowed. Henry was in the parlor, sprawled in velvet armchair, idly flipping through a week-old newspaper. Julian, ever restless, was in the stables, air thick with hay and horse flesh, drinking cheap whiskey from a flask, meticulously cleaning his favorite rifle, barrel gleaming ominously. The twins, Kora and Clara, were in their small, cold room, as they had been every night for 3 months, their presence a silent, almost forgotten fixture of the East Wing. At approximately 9000, as last vestiges of twilight faded into moonless, star-dusted night, Delphine, the cook, was walking back to her cabin. Her day done, feet aching, mind already anticipating brief respite of sleep. As she passed the main house, her gaze, habitually scanning for any sign of trouble or unusual activity, drifted towards the East Wing, and then she stopped, breath catching, sudden cold knot forming in her stomach. The East Wing window, the window of the twins' room, was open. This was profoundly unusual. Delphine remembered distinctly that the window had been nailed shut back in January after Julian, in a fit of pique, complained the twins were staring out too much, their silent gazes unsettling him. Delphine herself had seen the nails, long and thick, driven deep into the wooden frame, securing it with almost brutal finality. But now the window was undeniably open, a dark rectangular void against dimly lit wall, and the thin, grimy curtain fluttered gently in soft night breeze, a silent signal. Delphine stood frozen in darkness, heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs, watching, waiting. Then she saw movement. A shadow, impossibly quick and low, passed across the open window. Then another, a mirror image. The twins were climbing out. Delphine's first instinct was to cry out, to raise alarm, to fulfill her unspoken duty to the Baron. But something stopped her, a powerful, almost primal force. Maybe it was the way the twins moved, silent, deliberate, purposeful, like creatures of the night. Maybe it was the memory of sharp, splintering sounds from the carriage house weeks ago. Sounds she'd tried to forget. Maybe it was the simple, profound human understanding that some people, no matter their station, deserve to run, deserve a chance at escape. Or perhaps it was the chilling realization that their escape, however improbable, was a silent act of justice. She said nothing. She simply turned, movements slow and deliberate, and walked back to her cabin, gaze fixed ahead, ears straining for any sound from the house. She didn't look back. Not once, fearing to break the fragile spell, to betray the silent pact she'd just made with her conscience. The twins dropped from the window onto soft, damp ground below, landing with practiced grace that spoke of careful preparation. They rolled, absorbing impact, and came up running, bare feet silent on dew-kissed grass. They didn't head for the main road or the river's perilous escape. Instead, they ran toward the quarters, a cluster of dark, silent cabins nestled at the estate's edge. They moved through darkness like wisps of smoke, slipping between cabins, forms barely discernible against deeper shadows. They avoided the few workers still outside, lingering by cabin doors enjoying cool night air. They seemed to know exactly where they were going. Path unerring, as if they'd planned this moment. Rehearsed it countless times, waited for this precise confluence of warmth, darkness, and opportunity. They stopped at a cabin near the quarter's edge. A small, humble structure housing a woman named Iris and her 3 young children. Iris was a widow. Her husband, a quiet, hard-working man, had died 2 years prior in a tragic accident involving a runaway plow and spooked horse. She worked the fields from dawn till dusk, back bent, hands calloused, kept mostly to herself, her grief a silent companion. The other workers respected her quiet strength, unwavering resilience in relentless hardship. The twins approached the cabin door, hearts pounding, and knocked softly. A hesitant, almost imperceptible tap. Iris opened it, face etched with wariness, eyes still heavy with sleep. She saw them standing in pale moonlight. 2 identical figures, faces stark and serious, and froze, a gasp catching in her throat. Her first thought was ghosts, or perhaps a dream. "Please," one of the twins said, voice a soft hoarse whisper, barely audible above cricket chirping. It was the first word anyone had heard either speak in 3 months. A sound so fragile it seemed it might shatter. Her voice was rough, as if unused, a rusty hinge creaking open. "Please, we need help." Iris stared at them for a long agonizing moment, mind racing, trying to reconcile the silent, ghost-like figures with these desperate speaking girls. The implications of their presence on her doorstep were terrifying. Then slowly she stepped aside, movement stiff, and let them in, closing the door softly behind them, plunging the small cabin into near darkness. Inside, by flickering, uncertain light of a single tallow candle, the twins, Kora and Clara, finally told their story. Their voices, though still soft, gained strength as they spoke. Words flowing, a dam breaking. They weren't from Louisiana. They were from Virginia, from a small, unassuming town near Richmond, nestled among rolling hills and tobacco fields. Their mother had been a gifted seamstress, nimble fingers capable of intricate embroidery. Their father a strong, dependable blacksmith, his forge a constant source of warmth and light. They'd lived a quiet, good life, simple rhythms of work and family, until tragedy struck in summer 1872. Their parents died in a sudden, devastating fire consuming their small home, leaving them orphaned and alone. The twins, barely 13, had no other family, no kin to take them in. They were taken in by a local church, its pastor promising to find them a safe home, a new beginning. Instead, the church, burdened by poverty and overwhelming number of war orphans, had sold them. Not officially, not legally, not with a bill of sale, but sold them nonetheless to a man who dealt in children. Orphans, runaways, anyone who wouldn't be missed, whose absence would go unremarked. The man, a shadowy figure moving between states, had taken them to New Orleans, a city teeming with opportunity and desperation. There they were kept in a cramped, Squalid house with other children, all waiting like livestock to be sold again, futures hanging by a thread. In December 1873, Lucian de Virieux had come to that house. He inspected the children with cold, calculating gaze, eyes devoid of pity, the way one might inspect cattle, and chose the twins, their identical features and quiet demeanor appealing to his acquisition. He paid in cash, a thick wad of bills, and took them away, their fate sealed. They had been at the de Virieux estate for 3 months, locked in a small cold room, treated as things rather than people, their humanity systematically stripped away. They endured because they had no choice, no means of escape. But they had also been planning meticulously, patiently, minds working in shadows, because the twins had a secret, a weapon more potent than any physical force they could read and write. Their mother had taught them back in Virginia before the fire, instilling a love for knowledge transcending their circumstances. And in the de Virieux house, in the dusty, forgotten library, they'd found books. Old, forgotten books no one thought to lock away, for who would care? They read them in secret late at night, by faint stolen candlelight or pale moon glow. And they learned. They learned about law, the intricate dance of contracts and property, loopholes in Reconstruction's chaotic aftermath. They understood that while the spirit of law might be ignored, the letter, if properly invoked, still held sway. And they learned about the Greensburg courthouse, about power of official documents, signatures, stamps. When Henry had taken them into town in early March, ostensibly to file the document, legally binding them to the de Virieux family, Kora acted, while Henry, engrossed in self-importance, spoke with the clerk. Kora, heart hammering, slipped away. She found the records room, a labyrinth of shelves and dusty ledgers, and with a flash of insight, located the ledger where their fate was to be recorded. She stole a blank page, a pristine official sheet, waiting to be filled with words of freedom. That page, folded small and tucked into Kora's sleeve, they now showed to Iris. It was their declaration, their desperate plea. "What can write our own document?" Kora said, voice gaining quiet conviction. "We can say we were freed. We can say we have the right to leave. But we need a witness, someone who will sign it, say it's true, stand with us." Iris looked at the blank paper, then at the twins, faces earnest and determined in candlelight, then back at the paper. The weight of their request settled upon her, heavy and terrifying. "If I sign this," she said slowly, voice barely a whisper, "and they find out, they will kill me. They will kill my children." The fear was raw, palpable. "If you do not sign it," the other twin, Clara, said quietly, voice steady, "they will kill us, and they will continue what they do. Nothing will change." Iris was silent for a long, agonizing time. Outside, night was still and warm, air thick with damp earth. Somewhere in distance, a dog barked, a lonely sound in vast darkness. The candle flickered, casting dancing shadows on cabin walls, making twins' faces seem both ethereal and resolute. She thought of her own children, sleeping soundly in next room, and the precariousness of their existence. She thought of the injustices she'd witnessed, the quiet suffering of her community, and she thought of the courage these 2 young girls, barely more than children, possessed. Finally, with a deep shuddering breath, Iris reached for the pen, its nib scratching faintly against rough paper of the table. Her hand trembled, but her resolve, once found, was firm. Iris signed the document in early hours of March 20th, just before first faint blush of dawn touched eastern sky. Her hand shook visibly as she wrote her name. Simple, elegant script, testament to her own quiet education. But her signature, once completed, was clear and legible, a defiant mark against the Baron's power. The twins, faces alike with fragile hope, thanked her with profound, silent gratitude. They folded the precious paper carefully, meticulously, tucked it back into Kora's sleeve. A secret weapon hidden in plain sight. "What will you do now?" Iris asked, voice still laced with fear, but also burgeoning awe. "We will leave," Clara said, voice now imbued with quiet certainty. "Tonight, before they notice we are gone, before the sun fully rises and illuminates our absence. And if they catch you?" Iris pressed, gaze searching their faces. The thought of the Baron's retribution was a cold dread. The twins looked at each other. Silent communication passing between them. Shared understanding forged in hardship. And for the first time, Iris saw something in their dark eyes that was not fear, not despair, but colder, harder, utterly unyielding, a glint of steel, a spark of defiance. "They will not catch us," Kora said, voice flat, resolute. But they didn't leave that night. Because before they could, before first rays of sun could fully pierce darkness, something happened that changed everything, accelerating their carefully laid plans into a desperate, immediate gamble. At approximately 6 out of 100 in the morning, as first roosters began to crow, Julian de Virax, restless and bored even in early hours, decided to check on the twins. He found the door locked as always, a symbol of control. But when he unlocked it and pushed open, the small room was empty. Narrow bed undisturbed. Single chair vacant. The window, which he himself had ordered nailed shut, was open. Thin, grimy curtain fluttering gently in morning breeze. A silent, mocking banner of escape. Julian's face, usually flushed with drink or anger, went stark white. A cold, primal fear, unfamiliar and unwelcome, gripped him. He ran downstairs, heavy boots pounding on polished wood, shouting for father, brother, anyone who could hear. Voice raw with rage and disbelief. Within minutes, the entire estate plunged into chaos. Quiet morning, usually reserved for slow, deliberate preparations for day's work, shattered by shouts and frantic activity. Lucian, roused from sleep, face a mask of fury, ordered immediate, comprehensive search. Every cabin and quarters inspected, every nook turned inside out. Every worker questioned, answers scrutinized for any hint of complicity. The twins were to be found and brought back, no matter the cost, no matter what it took. His authority, his very image of control, had been challenged, an unforgivable offense. Henry, ever dutiful if cruel son, took armed men and began systematically searching vast fields. Eyes narrowed, rifle ready. Julian, face still pale with shock and rage, took another group and scoured dense woods along river. Movements erratic, temper simmering. Lucian himself, silver hair diseveled, eyes blazing, went directly to quarters, moving from cabin to cabin, presence a terrifying storm, demanding answers, voice booming with barely contained wrath. The workers, roused from sleep, stood silently, faces impassive, eyes carefully blank. They had seen nothing, heard nothing, knew nothing. Their collective ignorance was a shield, a silent act of resistance. Lucian's face darkened with each denial, each blank stare. But he didn't press them, not yet. He knew the futility of brute force against a wall of silence. But patience was wearing thin. By midday, search had expanded beyond de Virax's property, radiating outward like ripples in a pond. Riders dispatched to neighboring plantations, to small town of Greensburg, to bustling river docks. Detailed description of twins circulated. Identical girls, 14 or 15, light brown skin, dark hair braided tightly, plain gray dresses. But no one had seen them. The delta, vast and unforgiving, seemed to have swallowed them whole. By evening, as sun dipped below horizon casting long, ominous shadows, Lucian de Virax was beyond furious. He gathered his sons in study, air thick with tension, and slammed heavy oak door shut. The workers standing outside in yard, ears straining, could hear his voice. A low, guttural roar. though they couldn't make out specific words. The sound was enough. It spoke of a man pushed to brink. And then, just after sunset, as first stars began to prick darkening sky, something happened that no one, not even Lucian in his wildest imaginings, expected. The twins walked out of the quarters. They walked calmly, deliberately, side by side, hands folded neatly, faces composed, almost serene. They walked across dusty yard, past stables where horses whinnied nervously, past old carriage house, and stopped directly in front of the main house. Small figures silhouetted against lamplit veranda. Their return wasn't surrender, but a calculated, audacious challenge. Lucian, who had been pacing the veranda like a caged tiger, stopped dead, staring in utter disbelief. Mouth opening, closing, opening again, no words coming. "Where have you been?" he finally demanded, voice a mixture of rage and shock. The question was less about physical location, more about audacity of their return. Kora, movement slow and deliberate, reached into her sleeve and pulled out folded document. The blank page now filled with precise, elegant script, signed and witnessed. She held it up, extending it toward Lucian so he could see clearly in fading light. "What have been freed," she said, voice calm, steady, without trace of fear, a stark contrast to trembling whisper Iris had heard hours earlier. "This document says so. It is signed and witnessed. We are no longer your property, Baron." Lucian descended steps slowly, eyes fixed on paper, mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing, hearing. He took the document from Kora's outstretched hand, fingers brushing hers, and unfolded it with jerky, almost violent motion. His eyes scanned words, brow furrowing deeper with each passing moment. He said nothing, silence punctuated only by cricket chirping and distant frog croaking from bayou. Then a sound escaped his lips, began as low chuckle, escalated into harsh, bitter laugh devoid of genuine amusement. It was cold, chilling, and made workers watching from shadows of quarters shiver, a collective ripple of unease. "This," Lucian said, holding up paper, hand trembling slightly, "as forgery. A clumsy, pathetic forgery. Do you really think this will save you? Do you truly believe such crude deception will stand against my word?" "It is not a forgery," Clara said, voice equally calm, equally resolute. "It is a legal document. It was filed in the courthouse in Greensburg. It is on record. It is official." Lucian's mocking smile vanished, replaced by stunned disbelief, then dawning horror. "What?" he whispered, the single word sharp, disbelieving. "We filed it this morning," Kora explained, voice precise, almost pedagogical. "Before you woke up, before you knew we were gone. It is in the ledger now. It is official. It is the law." Lucian's face, pale with shock, flushed a deep angry red. He crumpled the paper in his fist, crushing the words of freedom, and took a menacing step toward twins, eyes blazing with dangerous fury. "You think you are clever," he snarled, voice low and dangerous, a predator's growl. "You think you can outsmart me, a Deviriux. You are wrong. I will go to that courthouse and have that document removed. I will have it burned, erased from existence. And then I will bring you back here, and I will make sure you never try this again. I will break you." "You cannot remove it," Kora said, voice unwavering, gaze meeting his with unnerving directness. "Because it is not the only copy." Lucian froze, menacing stride halted mid-step. The air crackled with sudden, profound tension. "We made 3 copies," Clara elaborated, voice a soft, chilling echo of her sister. "One is in the courthouse, officially filed. One is with a witness who will testify on our behalf, a person of good standing in this community. And one is hidden where you will never find it, a safeguard. If anything happens to us, if we disappear, if we are harmed, all 3 copies will be made public, and everyone will know what you did, Everyone will know you bought us, kept us as slaves 9 years after slavery was abolished. Your name, Baron de Virax, will be synonymous with shame." Lucian stared at them, jaw working, muscle twitching violently in his cheek. His hands, still clenched into fists, trembled with suppressed rage. The audacity, the sheer unimaginable defiance, a blow to his very core. "Who is the witness?" he demanded, voice barely a whisper, laced with desperate, chilling threat. The twins said nothing, their silence now a powerful weapon. "Who is the witness?" Lucian roared, voice echoing across silent yard, shattering fragile peace of evening. And then, from shadows of quarters, a voice spoke, a woman's voice, trembling slightly, but clear and resolute, cutting through tension like a knife. "I am." Iris stepped forward out of deep shadows cast by cabins into pale lamplight spilling from main house. Her figure was small, but her presence in that moment immense. She was trembling, yes, but her gaze fixed on Lucian was steady, unwavering. "I signed the document," she said, voice gaining strength with each word. "I am the witness, and I will testify to its truth." Lucian turned to her, eyes blazing with renewed, terrifying fury. For a moment, the workers watching from quarters thought he might strike her, unleash full unbridled wrath upon this brave, defiant woman. But he did not. Instead, a slow, chilling smile spread across his face, same cold, bitter smile that had sent shivers down Tobias Holt's spine. "Then you will hang with them," he said, voice a low, venomous promise. "All of you. You will all pay for this insolence." What happened next is a matter of public record, though the records themselves, as often in such volatile times, are incomplete, fragmented, deliberately obscured. Official narratives often omit inconvenient truths, uncomfortable details challenging established order. On crisp, cool morning of March 21st, 1874, air still carrying scent of damp earth and faint promise of spring, Lucian de Virax rode into Greensburg. He was not alone. His sons, Henry and Julian, rode beside him, faces grim, expressions a mixture of anger and apprehension. Behind them, 3 armed men, hardened overseers from the estate, rode with rifles slung across saddles, their presence a clear, unspoken threat. The small cavalcade moved with grim determination, kicking up dust on Main Street, drawing weary glances of few townspeople, already stirring. Lucian went directly to courthouse, brick facade looking particularly imposing in morning light. He strode inside, heavy boots echoing on wooden floor, presence filling quiet space with almost palpable menace. He demanded to see the ledger where property documents were filed. Voice booming, echoing off high ceilings. The clerk, a nervous young man named Thomas Whitley, barely out of teens, spectacles perched precariously on nose, emerged from a back office. Hands trembling slightly, he retrieved massive leather, bound ledger from its shelf, pages thick with history of land and ownership in St. Helena Parish. He placed it on counter, weight thudding softly and open to most recent entries, eyes darting nervously between the Baron and open page. There, dated March 20th, 1874, in clear, precise script, was a document. It stated unequivocally that 2 girls, Kora and Clara, formerly held by Lucian de Virax, had been legally freed, and were no longer subject to any claim of ownership, their freedom now enshrined in the very records that had once sought to bind them. The document was signed by Iris, listed prominently as a witness, her signature clear and resolute, and crucially, countersigned by a justice of the peace named Albert Finch, his official stamp lending undeniable legal weight. Lucian's eyes narrowed to slits, devouring words, face already flushed with anger deepening to dangerous purple. He slammed fist on counter, making Whitley jump. He demanded to see Finch, voice a low growl. The clerk, stammering, explained Finch had left town that very morning, heading north to Baton Rouge on urgent family business. Wouldn't return for several days, a convenient, or perhaps prescient, absence. Lucian then demanded the document be immediately removed. Torn from ledger, erased from existence. Wetly, face pale, shook his head. Explained. Voice barely a whisper. He didn't have authority to remove a legally filed document without court order, a judge's explicit command. The ledger, once entry made, was sacrosanct. Lucian, patience utterly exhausted, slammed fist on desk again. Sound echoing through quiet courthouse. He told the terrified clerk he would have document removed one way or another. With or without cooperation. Eyes burning with cold fury, promising dire consequences. Then he left. Heavy footsteps thudding ominously. Sons and armed men following. But he didn't go back to estate. Instead, rage still simmering, he went directly to sheriff's office. A small, unassuming building across Dusty Square. The sheriff of St. Helena Parish in 1874 was a man named Cyrus Tate, late 50s, face a road map of hard living and difficult choices. A former Confederate officer. He'd returned home after war to find his world, entire way of life, turned upside down. He didn't like Reconstruction. Didn't like new federal laws. Didn't like idea that people he'd once considered property were now legally his equals. He harbored deep, seated resentment for changes sweeping south. But he was also a practical man, a pragmatist who understood shifting tides, and his duty was to uphold the law, however reluctantly. Lucian burst into Tate's office, anger radiating like heat from furnace. He told Tate, in no uncertain terms, that 2 girls had stolen property from him, forged a legal document, and incited rebellion among his workers. He demanded they be immediately arrested and returned to custody, their insolence punished. Tate, a man of few words, listened patiently. Gaze steady, unblinking. When Lucian finished furious tirade, Tate asked calmly to see document. Lucian, seething, produced crumpled copy Kora had given him, tossing it onto Tate's desk with dismissive gesture. Tate picked it up, smoothed creases, and read it slowly, meticulously, eyes tracing each word. Then he looked up at Lucian, expression unreadable. This says they were freed, Mr. de Virux, Tate stated, voice flat, devoid of judgment. It is a forgery. Lucian roared, fist slamming on desk, making Inkwell jump. A blatant criminal forgery. Do you have proof of this forgery, Mr. de Virux? Tate asked, voice still calm, gaze unwavering. A sworn affidavit. A witness to the act of falsification. I do not need proof. Lucian thundered, face contorted with rage. They are my property. They were purchased legally before the eyes of God and man. Tate leaned back in creaking wooden chair. Gaze sweeping over Lucian, then to crumpled document. Mr. de Virux, with all due respect, slavery is illegal. Has been for 9 years. The 13th Amendment. If these girls were held against their will, that is a crime. And if this document is on file at the courthouse, signed by a justice of the peace, then as far as the law is concerned, they are free. My hands are tied. Lucian's face went dark. A dangerous storm cloud gathering. Whose side are you on? Tate, he snarled, question a thinly veiled threat. I am on the side of the law, Mr. de Virux, Tate said, voice hardening slightly. A flicker of steel in his eyes. And the law as it stands says they are free. I cannot arrest free citizens without cause. Lucian stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly, hands shaking with barely suppressed rage. Then the law, he spat, voice dripping with contempt, is wrong. And you, sheriff, are a fool. He turned abruptly and walked out, sons and men following, leaving Tate alone in quiet office, crumpled document still on desk. And that is when things began to unravel, not just for Lucian, but for fragile piece of Greensburg itself. Because Lucian, in blinding fury, Made a catastrophic mistake. He went back to courthouse, mind consumed by singular destructive purpose, to erase the document. Obliterate evidence of his humiliation. Thomas Whitley, young clerk, was still behind counter, face pale, hands still trembling. He saw Lucian and Terege re-enter, cold dread settling over him. Lucian strode directly to counter, eyes fixed on ledger. Demanded it again, voice low and menacing. Whitley, summoning desperate courage, refused to hand it over, clutching ledger to chest, knuckles white. Lucian, without a word, grabbed young man by collar, grip like iron, and shoved him violently against wall. Impact rattling shelves of documents. Henry and Julian stood by, watching, faces impassive, while three armed men positioned themselves by door, blocking escape, any intervention. But Whitley wasn't alone in courthouse that day. Others were present. A few clerks, couple of lawyers reviewing documents, handful of townspeople filing papers, and they saw what happened. They saw the Baron, a man of immense power, physically assaulting a public official, rage unchecked. One of them, a respected local lawyer named Marcus Hale, known for quiet integrity and sharp legal mind, stepped forward. He was of medium height, neatly trimmed beard, intelligent piercing eyes, had witnessed entire scene. Initial shock giving way to cold, righteous anger. He told Lucian, voice calm but firm, to release clerk. Lucian, focus entirely on ledger and terrified Whitley, ignored him, grip tightening. Hale raised his voice, making it carry through suddenly silent courthouse. "Oh, Mr. de Virax, you are assaulting a public official. This is a grave offense. If you do not release him immediately, I will have you arrested." Lucian turned slowly, eyes blazing with wild, dangerous light, finally acknowledging Hale's presence. "You will do nothing, lawyer," he snarled, voice dripping with contempt. "You will stand aside and mind your own business. I will do what the law requires, Mr. de Virax." Hale retorted, voice unwavering, gaze meeting Lucian's with equal intensity. "And the law requires that I report this assault." And then, in a moment of unbridled, incandescent rage, a moment he would later regret with bitterness consuming him, Lucian drew a small silver-plated pistol from his coat pocket. The metallic click of hammer being cocked echoed loudly in sudden, profound silence of courthouse. He pointed it directly at Marcus Hale, hand trembling slightly, intent clear. The room went utterly silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Air crackled with unbearable tension. "The law," Lucian said, voice shaking with fury, "is whatever I say it is. And I say you will be silent." But before he could utter another word, before he could make another move, Sheriff Tate walked into courthouse. He had heard commotion from his office across dusty street. Shouts, thud of bodies, sudden chilling silence, and came to investigate, hand already resting on butt of his own revolver. When he saw Lucian, pistol drawn, pointed at respected citizen, he drew his own weapon, heavy weight familiar in hand. "Put it down, de Virax," Tate said, voice low, steady, utterly devoid of negotiation, authority in his voice absolute. Lucian didn't move, eyes still fixed on Hale, finger hovering near trigger. "Put it down, or I will shoot you where you stand," Tate repeated, voice now colder, sharper, a clear warning. "I will not hesitate." For a long, agonizing moment, no one breathed. The fate of Greensburg, perhaps even the parish, hung in balance, suspended on edge of a single violent act. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly, Lucian lowered the gun. His shoulders slumped, fight draining out of him, replaced by dawning realization of gravity of his actions. Tate walked forward, movements deliberate, eyes never leaving Lucian. He took the pistol from Lucian's hand, cold metal heavy in his palm, and then, with swift, decisive motion, he placed Lucian de Virax under arrest. Henry and Julian, finally roused from stunned silence, protested loudly, stepping forward, faces contorted with outrage. The three armed men, rifles now useless, moved toward Tate, hands instinctively reaching for weapons. But Tate, gun still drawn, raised it slightly, gaze sweeping over them cold and uncompromising. He told them, voice hard, if they took one more step, made one more move, he would shoot them all. They stopped, bravado evaporating in face of Tate's unwavering resolve. Lucian de Viriax, the Baron, the man who believed himself above all law, was taken to parish jail, a small, dank building behind courthouse. He was held overnight, fury slowly congealing into bitter, impotent rage. The next morning he was brought before Judge Horace Bellamy, a stern, unyielding man with little patience for arrogance of planter class. Lucian was charged with assault, attempted theft of public records, and threatening a public official. The judge, face impassive, was not sympathetic. He set bail at 5,000, an enormous sum for the time, designed to keep a man incarcerated, and ordered Lucian to remain in custody until paid. But the damage, irreparable damage to Lucian's reputation and authority, was already done, because the story of what had happened in courthouse spread like wildfire. By end of day, everyone in Greensburg knew. They knew that Lucian de Viriax, the all-powerful Baron, had tried to steal a legal document, assaulted a clerk, drawn a gun on a respected lawyer, and been arrested by Sheriff Tate. And everyone knew why, because two girls, had used his own system, his own laws against him, and in doing so, shattered his illusion of invincibility. The whispers in quarters, silent defiance, had finally found voice, and it had brought down a titan. Lucian de Viriax was eventually released from jail 3 days later, after his lawyers, working frantically, arranged for exorbitant bail to be posted. The sum, a significant portion of liquid assets, was a bitter pill, a tangible cost of humiliation. But by then, story had spread far beyond dusty confines of Greensburg. Newspapers in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, eager for sensational headlines, picked it up, embellishing details, painting Lucian as a caricature of Old South's dying arrogance. Within a week, tale of the Baron and the defiant twins was being discussed in parlors and saloons across Louisiana. A scandal captivating and dividing. Reaction was sharply divided, reflecting deep fissures still running through post-Reconstruction society. Some, mostly those who had staunchly supported Confederacy, resented federal intervention, clung desperately to old social order, saw Lucian as a victim of unjust system. They argued twins had no right to file legal document, whole affair a farce orchestrated by carpetbaggers and radical Republicans, that Lucian had been entirely within rights to try reclaim what was, in their eyes, rightfully his property. They saw his actions as desperate defense of tradition, a last stand against encroaching modernity. But others, including many who harbored no particular love for Reconstruction, but understood law, however imperfect, was now reigning authority, saw Lucian as criminal, plain and simple. He had held 2 girls as slaves, 9 years after abolition, a blatant violation of federal law. He had assaulted a public official, threatened violence in a courthouse, a sacred space of justice, and been caught. His hubris exposed. Actions not a defense of tradition, but lawlessness, a dangerous challenge to fragile new order. The legal case against Lucian dragged on for months, a protracted, bitter battle fought in stifling heat of Louisiana summer. Lucian's formidable team of lawyers argued vehemently document was invalid, obtained through fraud and coercion, and girls should be returned to custody, freedom revoked. They painted twins as cunning manipulators, tools of outside agitators. But the twins, Kora and Clara, had something Lucian didn't: undeniable, unvarnished truth, and courage to speak it. They testified in court, voices still soft, but clear and unwavering, composure remarkable for their age. They recounted with chilling precision how they'd been taken from home in Virginia, sold in shadowy markets of New Orleans, then kept as slaves by Lucian, their lives reduced to cattle. They described conditions: small cold room, meager food, constant surveillance, subtle cruelties, dehumanization, treated as property rather than people, their very humanity denied. Their testimony, delivered with quiet dignity, cut through legal jargon and lawyers' bluster, reaching hearts of many in courtroom. Iris testified as well, her presence a powerful symbol of community solidarity. She confirmed she'd witnessed document, heard twins' story, believed them implicitly. Her quiet strength, willingness to risk everything, lent immense credibility to their claims. And Marcus Hale, lawyer who'd confronted Lucian, took twins' case pro bono, driven by deep sense of justice. He argued passionately document was legal and binding. Twins had every right to file it. And Lucian had committed multiple egregious crimes in desperate, violent attempt to reclaim them. He presented case not just as matter of property, but fundamental question of human rights and rule of law in changing South. In August 1874, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, Judge Horace Bellamy delivered verdict. His voice, usually dry and legalistic, carried rare note of solemnity. He declared document valid, Kora and Clara unequivocally free citizens of United States, and Lucian de Virieux guilty of assault, attempted theft of public records, and threatening a public official. Lucian was fined $2,000, a substantial sum, but mere fraction of his wealth, and sentenced to 6 months in jail. The sentence meant to be deterrent, public declaration that even most powerful not above law. But Lucian never served sentence. On night of August 15, 1874, under cover of moonless sky, Lucian de Virieux disappeared. He left sprawling estate, left sons, left everything he'd built and coveted, and was never seen again. Circumstances of vanishing shrouded in mystery, fueling endless speculation. Some said he fled south across border to Mexico, seeking refuge from law and shattered reputation. Some whispered he'd sailed to Europe, to continent where his barren title might hold more weight. Others, more cynical, suggested he'd taken his own life, unable to bear shame and humiliation. No one knows for certain. His disappearance became local legend, a cautionary tale whispered around campfires. Henry and Julian tried, in their own inept ways, to maintain a state, cling to remnants of father's empire, but without Lucian's iron will, cunning, ruthless efficiency, they couldn't hold it together. Workers, emboldened by twins' victory, began leaving, seeking better opportunities, or simply freedom from de Virieux's name. Debts, long managed by Lucian's shrewd hand, piled up, overwhelming feckless sons. Within 2 years, once grand property, fields overgrown, house falling into disrepair, was sold at auction, legacy dissolved into obscurity. Henry, spirit broken, cruelty now aimless, moved to rough frontier of Texas, died in drunken bar fight in 1879, pathetic end to a life of privilege. Julian, consumed by vices, drank himself to death in squalid New Orleans boarding house in 1881, body found by sympathetic landlady. The de Virieux name, once symbol of immense power and fear in Satan, Helena Parish, faded into obscurity, little more than a footnote in Parish's troubled history. As for twins, Kora and Clara, they left St. Helena Parish in fall of 1874, departure quiet and unceremonious, stark contrast to dramatic arrival. Iris, brave widow who'd risked everything, went with them, along with her 3 children. They traveled north, a long, arduous journey, eventually settling in small Quaker-influenced town outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, far removed from humid, oppressive Delta. There, in their new home, Kora and Clara opened a small school for free children, a beacon of hope in community eager for education. They taught reading, writing, arithmetic, lessons imbued with quiet passion. Never charged a fee, believing knowledge should be freely given. They lived quietly, modestly, lives dedicated to empowering others through very tools that had secured their own freedom. They never spoke publicly about what had happened in Louisiana. Trauma too deep, memories too painful to share with strangers. But they kept the document, the original, signed and witnessed. The blank page that had become their Declaration of Independence, carefully framed and hung on wall of their small schoolhouse. A silent testament to their courage. And beneath it, in Kora's careful, elegant handwriting, a single profound sentence. Some gifts are not meant to be kept. Iris lived with them until her death in 1891. A beloved matriarch, her quiet strength a constant presence. Her children grew, married, had children of their own. Lives flourishing in freedom their mother helped secure. And they all knew the story, passed down through generations, of twin girls who outsmarted a baron, used power of words to change everything, and the brave woman who stood with them. Kora and Clara lived long, fulfilling lives, bond unbroken. They died within a week of each other in harsh winter of 1929, bodies finally succumbing to passage of time. Buried side by side in small, unassuming cemetery in Pennsylvania, graves unmarked, names known only to a few. But their story, a testament to resilience, courage, and quiet power of defiance, remains. A story reminding us that history isn't always written by the powerful, but sometimes by the silent, overlooked, and brave. What do you think of this story? Does it resonate with hidden histories you believe are still buried in records of places like St. Helena Parish? Leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more dark historical mysteries, stories that make you question what really happened and challenge conventional narratives, then subscribe, hit notification bell, and share this video with someone who loves stories delving into profound depths of the past. See you in the next video.